I was 10 when my mother died. A car crash. Quick, brutal, no time for goodbyes. One day she was laughing in the kitchen, humming some old song while braiding my hair, and the next she was just gone. And my father? He didn't mourn. He replaced. Within a year, he married Helena, a woman with the warmth of a tax auditor and the smile of a shark who smelled blood. And then there was Camilla. Oh, Camilla, my stepsister, the golden child, the prodigy, the living, breathing reminder that I was now officially surplus to requirements. The first time I realised I was nothing in that house? It was my 13th birthday. My father had promised to take me out. Just the two of us, like we used to do when my mother was alive. But that morning, Camilla accidentally spilled grape juice on her white dress right before we were supposed to leave. You should have seen the performance. The trembling lip, the wobbling voice. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. My father didn't even look at me, just patted her head and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart, we'll fix it." And just like that, my birthday became her emergency. We stayed home. I ate my cake alone in my room while they fussed over her in the living room. That was the pattern. Every achievement of mine was a footnote. Every minor thing Camilla did was a headline. I won a debate competition. That's nice, Clara. Camilla got a B+ on a math test. We should celebrate. I learned to cook my mother's recipes just to feel close to her. Helena took one bite and said, "A bit salty, isn't it?" Camilla burned toast and they framed it like a modern art masterpiece. Look how hard she's trying. By the time I turned 18, I had perfected the art of invisibility. I spoke only when spoken to, smiled when expected, kept my victories to myself. Because if I dared to shine, Camilla would adjust the spotlight. Like the time I got accepted into Stanford. My father actually looked proud for 5 whole seconds, until Camilla burst into tears because her dream school, the same one, coincidentally, waitlisted her. Suddenly, my acceptance wasn't my success. It was her tragedy. How could they take Clara and not you? My father fumed, as if my worth was an insult to hers. And the thing is, I knew what they were doing. I wasn't stupid. I saw the way Helena's eyes lingered on my mother's portrait, like it offended her. I noticed how Camilla's accidents always happened when I was about to get something she wanted. But calling it out would have made me the ungrateful one, the paranoid one. So I stayed quiet. Right up until the day Camilla decided quiet wasn't enough. She didn't just want me out of the way, she wanted me gone. And the worst part, no one would have even missed me. My mother's fortune was the unspoken shadow in every room, the ghost at every dinner table. She came from old money, the kind that didn't just buy yachts but entire legacies. And when she died, she left it all to me. Not my father, not his shiny new wife, just me. With one condition, I wouldn't touch the bulk of it until I turned 25. A safety net, she called it. A way to make sure I grew up before the world tried to chew me apart. Funny how that kind of protection just paints a target on your back instead. Helena and Camilla didn't just resent me for existing, they resented me for costing them. Every time my father had to sign off on my trust fund payments for school, Helena's smile tightened like a noose. Every time Camilla eyed my mother's jewellery, my jewellery, she didn't see heirlooms. She saw a theft in progress. I figured it out the summer I turned 20. I came home late one night and heard them in the study. Helena's voice a razor wrapped in silk. If something happened to her before 25, who would the money go to? My father's answer was a sigh, tired and guilty. The trust would dissolve. It'd go to me. Then you. There was a beat of silence. Then Camilla's laugh. Light, airy, the kind that made your skin crawl. Well, let's hope nothing happens then. I should have run, I should have screamed. But what would that have changed? My father knew. He let them think it, and that was the moment I realised the money wasn't just mine, it was my life insurance. Because if I died, they wouldn't just get rich, they'd get away with it. After that, I started noticing things. Camilla's sudden interest in my jogging route, Helena accidentally switching my allergy medication, the way my father would look at me sometimes, not with love, not even with guilt, but with the quiet calculation of a man measuring a risk. I stopped eating anything I didn't make myself. I double-checked my car brakes. I slept with a chair wedged under my doorknob. And then, because I wasn't stupid, I started collecting proof. Voice memos, bank statements. The day Camilla joked about pushing me down the stairs, I made sure my phone was recording. The night Helena Googled untraceable sedatives, I took a screenshot. I thought I was being paranoid. Turns out, I wasn't paranoid enough. Because Camilla didn't need poison, she just needed one good push. Some betrayals don't come with dramatic music or ominous warnings. They happen on an ordinary Tuesday, under a sky that couldn't care less. Camilla suggested the train station. That should have been my first clue. "We need to talk," she'd said, all wide eyes and trembling lips, like some tragic heroine in a bad soap opera. Properly, just us sisters. As if we'd ever been anything close to sisters. As if she hadn't spent the last decade making sure I knew my place was beneath her heel. But I went anyway, because that's what we do, isn't it? We keep hoping even when we know better. The platform was nearly empty that evening, just a few stragglers waiting for the last trains home. Camilla leaned against a pillar, the picture of casual elegance in her designer coat, while I stood near the edge, my back to the tracks. She talked about family and forgiveness, her words smooth as poisoned honey. "I know we've had our differences," she sighed, "but blood is blood." I almost laughed. The only blood between us was the kind she'd happily spill. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and something shifted in her face, a flicker of anticipation, gone before I could be sure I'd seen it. "Look at that," she murmured, nodding past my shoulder. "Isn't that Dad's car?" And like an idiot, I turned. I felt it before I understood it. The sharp press of her palms between my shoulder blades, the sickening lurch as my balance betrayed me. For one frozen second, I hung in the air, weightless, staring into Camilla's wide, gleaming eyes. No panic, no regret, just triumph. Then the world exploded in noise and pain as the train hit. The last thing I heard wasn't the screams of bystanders or the screech of brakes. It was Camilla's whisper, barely audible over the chaos. Finally, the police called it a tragic accident. A distraught young woman losing her footing. My father wept on cue for the cameras. Helena clutched Camilla's hand like she was the victim. And Camilla, she wore black lace to my funeral and cried so prettily they put her picture in the society pages. By the time they buried me, she'd already moved into my room, wearing my mother's pearls. But here's the thing about fate, it's got a wicked sense of humour. And I wasn't done laughing yet. Death, I discovered, wasn't the end. It was a reset button. One moment I was nothing. No body, no breath, just scattered consciousness dissolving into the dark. The next, I was gasping awake in a sunlit bedroom, silk sheets tangled around my legs, my heart hammering like it was trying to escape my chest. My old bedroom? Not the stripped-down mausoleum it became after I died, but mine, the way it looked 3 years ago. Stanford acceptance letter still pinned to the bulletin board. Half-finished coffee gone cold on the nightstand. The familiar crack in the ceiling plaster I used to stare at during sleepless nights. I stumbled to the mirror, half expecting a ghost, but the face staring back was undeniably alive. Younger, softer at the edges, no shadows under the eyes yet. Then the date on my phone hit me like a sucker punch. Camilla's wedding day. Not just any day, the day she'd stood in front of 200 guests and wept crocodile tears for her dear, departed stepsister, all while wearing my mother's emerald necklace. The day my father had toasted her strength in the face of tragedy, as if my death was just another obstacle for his golden child to overcome. I sank onto the bed, gripping the sheets until my knuckles turned white. The air smelled like jasmine from the garden, Helena's favourite. Of course, they'd filled the house with her flowers for the wedding. A knock at the door. "Clara?" The housekeeper's voice, warm and familiar. "You're needed for the final dress fitting in an hour." Dress fitting. Right. Because in this timeline, I was still alive, still playing the dutiful sister, still pretending we were a family. I pressed my palms to my eyes and laughed, sharp and humorless. They'd killed me once. Now I had 12 hours to return the favour. The clock was ticking, and this time I wouldn't be the one leaving in a body bag. I had 6 hours until the wedding ceremony, 6 hours to dig up enough dirt to bury Camilla alive. The problem? In this timeline, I hadn't started collecting proof yet. No voice memos, no screenshots, just my word against the family darling. First stop, Camilla's laptop. She'd left it carelessly open on the breakfast table. Typical arrogance. A quick glance confirmed she hadn't changed her password since college. M1L4 Queen. I nearly gagged. Her search history was a treasure trove of guilt. Can inheritance be contested if heir disappears? How long before a missing person is declared dead? Best cliff hiking spots near Bay Area. Charming. Next, her cloud backups. Deleted files are never really gone, just hiding. I found the draft emails first. One to her fiancé dated 2 weeks ago. Once we're married, we'll have access to the trust through Dad. Clara's just a formality at this point. Then the real goldmine, a scanned copy of my mother's will with certain sections highlighted. The clause about my inheritance dissolving if I died before 25 was circled in digital red. I took photos of everything. The bedroom safe was trickier. Camilla had stolen my mother's jewellery box months ago, claiming she wanted to keep it safe. The safe code? Her birthday, obviously. Inside, nestled beside diamond earrings and my grandmother's pearls, was a receipt from a private investigator dated 3 days ago. Surveillance photos of me jogging near the train tracks. Bingo. I texted the PI's number from a burner app. Update on the target. The immediate reply made my blood run cold. Confirmed her running route. Easy access to tracks with no cameras. Proceeding as discussed. I screenshotted it just as footsteps echoed in the hall. Camilla's voice, sugar sweet. "Clara, are you in here?" I snapped the safe shut as the doorknob turned. She stood framed in the doorway, already in her silk robe, hair in perfect curls. "There you are," she smiled. "I was starting to think you were avoiding me." The necklace around her throat glinted emerald green. My mother's necklace. "Wouldn't dream of it," I said, pocketing my phone. Her eyes flicked to the safe. "Too late, darling. The trap was already set. I needed Camilla to slip up, to get reckless, to make a mistake that would seal her fate. So I planted the perfect bait. A rumour whispered just loud enough to reach her ears. At the bridal luncheon, I let my hands shake as I pretended to take a call. "Yes, the lawyer confirmed it," I murmured just within earshot of Helena's gossipy cousin. "If anything happens to me before the wedding, the entire estate goes to Mother's Charity Foundation. Every last penny." The cousin's champagne flute froze halfway to her lips. By sunset, the news had spread through the wedding party like wildfire. I watched from the terrace as Camilla's perfect composure cracked just for an instant when her maid of honour relayed the tragic clause. Her manicured nails dug into her champagne flute hard enough to snap the stem. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait. Camilla took less than an hour to bite. From my hidden perch in the garden, I watched her sneak to the groom's smoking lounge, the one place without security cameras. Through the cracked window, her hissed conversation carried perfectly. "We have to move tonight, before the ceremony." Her fiancé's nervous chuckle. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" Camilla's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "That little bitch just signed her own death warrant." My phone recorded every word. Then came the piece de resistance. Camilla dialing a number from memory. "Change your plans," she told the voice on the line. "It needs to look like an accident at the reception. The cliffside balcony. Yes, during the fireworks." I slipped away before she could turn around, my pulse roaring in my ears. One final touch, I accidentally left my annotated copy of the will, with the fake charity clause clearly highlighted, on my vanity. Let them think they'd discovered my secret. By the time I changed into my maid of honor dress, the house hummed with tension. Camilla's smile when she saw me was all sharp edges. "There's my favourite sister," she cooed, adjusting my necklace with fingers that lingered too long near my throat. I smiled back. Wouldn't miss this for the world. The clock ticked toward sunset. Let her think she was the hunter. The real game was just beginning. 200 guests sat in hushed anticipation, their designer outfits rustling as they waited for the blushing bride. The string quartet played something achingly sweet, all soaring violins and false promises. I stood near the back, watching as my father adjusted his tie for the 10th time, his proud smile never reaching his eyes. Then the music shifted. The crowd rose as one, turning toward the aisle where Camilla would make her grand appearance. But instead of bridal march, I signalled the musicians, a sharp nod I'd arranged hours earlier. The violin screeched to a halt. Silence crashed over the chapel. Then the doors burst open. Not for Camilla. For me. I'd worn the exact outfit I died in. Black silk dress, scuffed ballet flats, the silver locket my mother gave me for my 16th birthday. Gasps rippled through the crowd as I strode down the aisle, my heels clicking like a countdown on the marble floor. Camilla stood frozen at the altar, her face draining of colour. Her bouquet hit the ground with a muffled thud, roses scattering like drops of blood on white satin. "Miss me?" I asked, my voice carrying in the dead silence. The groom took an instinctive step back. My father's mouth opened and closed like a stranded fish. "But Camilla..." "Oh," Camilla found her voice. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. A few guests chuckled nervously, thinking this was some bizarre wedding prank. I tilted my head. "No? Where exactly should I be, Camilla? 6 feet under?" The chapel went utterly still. Then I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. The recording played crystal clear through the sound system. Camilla's voice, cold and calculating. That little bitch just signed her own death warrant. The cliffside balcony. Yes, during the fireworks. Every head swiveled toward the altar. Camilla's hands flew to her mouth. "That's not... I didn't..." But the evidence wasn't done. Security footage flashed across the screens, meant for wedding photos. Camilla at the train station, her hands outstretched as I fell. Then, the final nail. The PI's text confirmation about my accident at the tracks timestamped the day of my death. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman screamed. Camilla's perfect facade shattered. "She's framing me!" she shrieked, rounding on her fiancé. "You know I wouldn't..." But he recoiled like she was contagious. That's when the police pushed through the doors, right on schedule. For 3 heartbeats after the recordings finished, the chapel held its breath. 200 people suspended in perfect, horrified stillness, like a painting of Judgment Day. Then, chaos erupted. Camilla's first mistake was lunging for my phone. Her veil tore as she stumbled down the altar steps, her manicured hands clawing at the air between us. "It's fake," she screeched, her voice unraveling at the edges. "She doctored all of it." I didn't flinch, just swiped to the next piece of evidence, a video from her own laptop, timestamped 2 days ago. There she was, rehearsing her grieving widow speech in the mirror. Losing Clara was like losing part of myself. A pause. Then, to someone off camera, "Too much? Should I cry on part of myself or wait for the..." The crowd's murmurs turned to growls. Her second mistake was looking to our father for help. The man who'd spent a lifetime making excuses for her now stood rigid, his face ashen. When Camilla whimpered, "Daddy?" he actually took a step back, like her desperation was contagious. That's when I unleashed the coup de grace. "Check your emails," I announced. Phones buzzed across the room as the file I'd pre-scheduled hit every inbox. A scanned copy of my mother's original will with one damning addendum no one had mentioned. Should Clara die under suspicious circumstances, all assets immediately transfer to the Victims' Rights charity she designated at 18. A collective gasp. Camilla's knees hit the marble floor. Helena finally broke free of the crowd, her designer heels clicking like gunshots. "This is absurd," she spat. "My daughter would never..." "Your daughter already did." I projected the PI's invoice onto the screens. $15,000 paid in cash for discreet surveillance of C. Montgomery's daily routines, dated 1 week before my death. The groom made a sound like a deflating balloon and fainted into a groomsman's arms. Camilla's third mistake? Begging. She crawled toward me, her makeup streaking in grotesque black rivers. "Please," she sobbed, clutching at my shoes. "I didn't mean..." I bent down, close enough for only her to hear. "You meant every word." Then louder for the room. "Just like you meant to push me in front of that train." The police moved in then, their handcuffs glinting under the chandeliers. As they hauled her up, Camilla's pristine wedding gown split at the seams, an embarrassingly literal unravelling. Helena screamed curses. My father collapsed into a pew, and, through it all, I stood perfectly still, watching as they read Camilla her rights over the still-playing wedding march. The irony was almost poetic. Almost. Because the best part, this was just the beginning, the clink of handcuffs snapping shut, the rip of tulle as Camilla thrashed against the officers, the wet, ugly sobs tearing from her throat as reality sank its teeth in. Her fiancé was the first to turn. "Psychotic bitch!" he roared, still swaying from his fainting spell, face mottled with rage. He hurled his wedding band at her. It bounced off her forehead, leaving a tiny red mark. "You were going to kill her and frame me." Camilla's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then came the domino effect. Her bridesmaids, supposed best friends since boarding school, edged away like she was radioactive. The wedding planner started frantically cancelling vendors on her headset. The society photographer, ever the opportunist, began snapping pictures of the arrest instead of the bride. I stood near the altar, running my fingers along my mother's reclaimed emerald necklace, watching the destruction unfold. Helena lunged at me, nails first. "You planned this!" Security intercepted her before she got close, but not before she spat at my feet. "She's your sister!" I smiled. "No, she's your daughter!" The distinction hung in the air like smoke. Camilla found her voice then. Not the calculated, honeyed tone she used at galas, but something raw and feral. "You'll regret this," she hissed as the police dragged her toward the doors. "I'll get out, and when I do..." "Camilla, shut up!" Helena shrieked, finally realizing every word was being recorded. Too late. The guests parted like the Red Sea as they hauled her through the chapel. Camilla's once pristine veil trailed behind her, trampled by gawking attendees. Outside, flashes from press cameras lit up the evening. Someone had tipped off the media. Perfect. My father finally spoke, his voice barely audible. Clara, I didn't look at him. Just watched through the stained glass windows as they stuffed Camilla into a squad car, her mascara-streaked face pressed against the glass. Here's the funny part, I said, still staring at her distorted silhouette. I didn't even need to lie. Just show the truth and let it do the work. The reception table still gleamed with untouched champagne. I grabbed a glass and raised it toward the window in a mock toast as the police car pulled away. To new beginnings. Then I turned to face the wreckage of my family. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and schadenfreude. Camilla's trial was the social event of the season. Standing room only, reporters crammed in the back, sketch artists scrambling to capture every damning moment. She'd traded her wedding gown for an orange jumpsuit, but still held her chin high, as if this were just another society gala where she happened to be the unfortunate centre of attention. Her lawyer spun a valiant tale of misunderstandings and coincidences. That security footage? Clearly doctored. The PI's testimony? A paid liar. My miraculous return from the dead? Highly suspicious. Then the prosecution played the recording from my pocket, the one made as I fell. Camilla's whisper. Finally, echoed through the silent courtroom like a gunshot. Her mask slipped then, just for a second. A flicker of pure, undiluted hatred directed at me across the aisle. I smiled back sweetly and adjusted my mother's pearls. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When the foreman read the verdict, guilty on all counts, Helena screamed so loudly they had to remove her from the courtroom. Camilla didn't react at first, just stood perfectly still, her manicured hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. Then, as the bailiff moved to cuff her, she lunged across the table at me. You ruined everything. They tackled her before she got close, but not before the cameras caught every glorious second. Her snarl, her wild eyes, the way her designer blouse ripped at the shoulder as they restrained her. The media would run the footage on loop for weeks. The judge sentenced her to 25 years with no parole. A pretty number, one for each year she'd tried to steal from me. Outside the courthouse, reporters shoved microphones in my face. How do you feel? Any message for your stepsister? I waited for the perfect silence before answering. Justice tastes better than revenge. Then I walked away, leaving them to dissect the soundbite. Helena tried to appeal, of course, hired new lawyers, sold her jewellery, even begged my father for money, but he'd finally grown a spine. Or more likely, realised which side his bread was buttered on. He cut her off completely, leaving her to drown in legal fees and disgrace. Last I heard, she was working as a sales clerk in some no-name boutique. Fitting. She'd spent her life putting on performances. Now she got to do it for minimum wage. As for Camilla, prison wasn't kind to privileged girls used to getting their way. The tabloids ate up every rumour, the fights, the solitary confinement, the way her former friends suddenly couldn't recall her name. I didn't visit, didn't write, but I did frame the newspaper headline from her conviction day and hang it in my office. Heiress gets life sentence. Real victim finally free. The ultimate trophy. They say living well is the best revenge. They're wrong. Living unapologetically is better. I turned my mother's fortune into an empire that made the family's old money look like pocket change. The Montgomery Foundation didn't just donate to charities. It built hospitals, funded schools, became a beacon so bright it scorched the shadows of my past. Every ribbon I cut, every check I signed, was a middle finger to everyone who thought I'd disappear quietly. The boardroom became my stage. Where I'd once shrunk from attention, I now commanded it, not with Camilla's performative charm, but with cold, unshakable competence. When old associates of my father's tried to patronise me, I bankrupted their companies. When society matrons whispered behind their gloves, I bought their favourite charities and renamed them after my mother. But the real victory wasn't in the grand gestures. It was in the quiet mornings. Waking up in my penthouse, mine not a relic of the family estate, to sunlight unfiltered by anyone's expectations. Drinking coffee that wasn't checked for poison, running through the park without glancing over my shoulder. Freedom tasted like the raspberry croissants from the bakery downstairs, still warm from the oven. Like the salt-kissed air during my solo trips to Bali, where no one knew my name or my net worth. Like the crisp pages of the passport I'd filled with stamps from every continent, because no one could stop me from leaving ever again. On the 5th anniversary of my rebirth, I hosted a party at the newly opened Montgomery Arts Centre. The guest list was a carefully curated collection of people who'd actually seen me when I was invisible, the chemistry teacher who encouraged me, the librarian who let me hide in the stacks after school, the few friends who'd stuck by me when I had nothing to offer but sarcasm and trauma. No family, no regrets. As the string quartet played, a waiter handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter from the parole board. Camilla's latest appeal had been denied. Paperclipped to it was a recent prison photo from a tabloid. Her once glossy hair now dull, her posture defeated. I let it drop into the champagne fountain. Later, as fireworks exploded over the city, my oldest friend squeezed my hand. "You won," she murmured. I watched the colours bloom across the sky, vibrant, temporary, beautiful. "No," I said, "I just stopped playing their game." And that was sweeter than any victory.